So all you have to do is look and listen at the two of us, right? And people at home, just look around or look out on the street and look at the ways that we're different in our mannerisms, in our voice. Mine's a little deep right now because I did sleep a little late and I'm just having my coffee here. It'll rise. But all of those differences that we see in not just behavior, but also just the way we are physically and the implications even that those physical differences have for society. I think initially, just since I was little, I grew up with 3 older brothers. And of course, I had a couple boyfriends and a father and a mother. So everybody has people of different sexes in their lives, right? And we hear a lot, at least we do here in the States. I don't know what it's like for you, and I'd be interested in hearing about this, but there is this narrative that a lot of the differences that everybody sees and everybody notices are really due to culture and the patriarchy, which is a kind of contested term and concept. So when I went out to Uganda to study chimps in the 1998 and 1999, I spent 8 months out there, and there's no human culture in the chimps. They're not like shopping at the supermarket and calling each other names with words and arguing, etc. They are pure. They're completely separate in terms of their natures and their environment. Yet, even though there is not a shred of human culture, except for the humans like me, of course, who are observing them, there just isn't a shred of influence of human culture. Yet what we see is something very reminiscent of human sex differences. And that is that the males are, in fact, much more status conscious, much more physically aggressive. They actually beat their chests sometimes and stamp on tree buttresses to make big sounds. They try to fluff up their hair to make themselves look bigger. They try to intimidate, but they can also be awesome, just like human men. They can be very nurturing and loving, and they are all, both sexes are interested in food and sleeping and having some sex here and there, but the females overall are just much less interested, although they still have some interest. They're still can be very aggressive and status conscious, etc. But really, they're more concerned with their families and their children, and they're much more peaceful overall. That's a long way of saying that's what got me interested in really understanding what it is about our shared biology, our shared evolutionary inheritance, i.e. genes, that helps to explain these similarities. And then also, why are we different? But really, that's what got me interested in testosterone, because that is the aspect of our shared biology that really has the most power in shaping sex differences. Estrogen's important too, but testosterone has these very dramatic effects with these implications for society that we really do need to pay attention to, especially around male violence.
Sorry. So when I was reading your book, what I realized was you have given a lot of chapters and you've provided much evidence. Not only with evidence, you've provided contradicting evidence to what earlier claims would have been made. And then you've also provided your arguments with those evidence, and you've reasoned very well as to why testosterone is actually responsible for these behaviors and not just a socialization process. What I also realized was you have actually explained biology in a manner where even the non-biology students can understand. So as we adventure into this realm of testosterone, can you please tell us what is this hormone? And in its entire constituent form, and then can we go on to its various aspects and its implications in our lives?
Yeah. Can you just give me some idea of your audience? What kind of background people have?
Well, we are college-going students, most of us, and we have some external people as well. But we are somewhere between 18 to 24 of age.
Okay. And so have most people taken sort of basic human biology or not really?
Well, they have, but compared to what I've read in the book, it's a long thing, and it's very fascinating at the same time. So, if I had to speak about it at this moment, I would actually make people lose interest in what you've done. So, I would rather not do that. And so that's the
No,
reason I
no,
wanted
of
to lay
course.
down the
Yeah, yeah. I
groundational
just
framework, and then we can go forward with that.
great. So yeah, I should say when I came to college, I had no idea what hormones were. And even actually in college, I didn't learn about hormones. I was a psychology major, so I learned about the nervous system, but I really didn't know what a hormone was. So let's see, one easy way I think to kind of start to describe what hormones are is to talk about insulin, because that's a insulin is secreted by this organ that is partly an endocrine organ, and that's the pancreas. And it is basically responsible for controlling. You lost me, and you'll get me right back. So I'm just going to pause.
Yes, doctor, you're back now.
Okay,
Sorry.
you seem to have lost me.
Well, I can hear you now.
I lost you anyway.
I can hear you now, actually.
Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me.
Doctor, I
But
can
you're
hear you.
frozen.
Can you hear me? Doctor, am I audible to you? Hello? Doctor, hello? Apologies for the network issues. We'll just be right back in a few minutes. Doctor, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I should say that sometimes the internet goes out, but it's usually just for 30 seconds and comes right back.
Yes.
So that has not happened before, so I don't know what that is. But yeah, I hopefully that won't happen again. But I'll just get right. So where did you lose me? At insulin?
Yes, you said something about insulin, then it stopped, and then it went fast. I couldn't catch up.
Okay, so hormones have functions in our body to regulate processes that help us to maintain life and grow and repair, but also reproduce. And what are called the sex hormones, I prefer to call them reproductive hormones, say estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, are really just about reproduction, not about growth and survival and maintenance. So the rest of our hormones, say, just take insulin, for example, secreted by an endocrine organ. So we have endocrine organs throughout our body. Our brain actually also produces hormones. We have the thyroid gland that controls largely metabolism. You have obviously testes and ovaries. You have the adrenal gland, which can secrete cortisol and aldosterone, which help to regulate blood sugar and stress and the sodium balance and water balance, say. But then, okay, if you have eaten dinner, have you had dinner? All right. Oh, you have not. So are you hungry?
Right now, no, but by 7:30 this time I would be.
Okay.
Yes.
So some people are hungry, some people might have eaten, right? So if you sort of tune into your body, if you've just eaten, then you need to be able to store and use the energy from the nutrients that you take in. You also, at the same time, need to communicate to your brain the status of your energy availability. So what insulin does is it helps to clear the blood sugar from the glucose from your blood in a way that regulates blood sugar that's adaptive for you, given your circumstances and your environment. So insulin will go up when you have a meal, especially if it's a high carbohydrate meal. Insulin goes around and tells your cells that there is glucose available. It causes little portals to open up so glucose can get into your cell. So it has an action at the cell. There are receptors for insulin on the cell. Insulin is a protein hormone. It's made out of amino acids, and it has this effect. If you're running a marathon, you're going to be burning some of that glucose. You're going to be storing some. Insulin tends to regulate that process of storing energy. And it's not just glucose. It can also be fats and proteins even. Okay, so that information is communicated by the same hormone that has these really profound life-promoting effects on energy availability in the body. It communicates that to the brain at the same time. So if you've just eaten, insulin is part of a network of hormones, but a really important one that tells you you're taking energy in. From a evolutionary or adaptive point of view, that's not the time to go out necessarily looking for food. It depends on the species and the environment, but generally you can be spending energy, you can be relaxing, and you're not hungry. So you're not motivated to go get more food and eat it, which would not be the right thing for you to do as an animal at that point. And then when your insulin is lower and your blood sugar is low, then that is also signaled to your brain. And that's when you start getting irritable, say, because your blood sugar is low, you start getting distracted, you can't pay attention to the lecture or whatever it is you're doing, and you want to go find food. That is the same hormone, has these actions in our brain to modify behavior and our urges and what's rewarding and what is sort of annoying that we want to, relieve by meeting the need. So it has these dual effects. And that's easy to understand. It regulates energy in the body and then communicates that information to the brain to coordinate what's happening in the body with your behavior so you can survive and then ultimately reproduce. But if you're going to reproduce, you need another set of hormones that control long-term processes. Okay, so insulin is a protein. It has short-term actions that it acts quickly and the effects extinguish quickly. But for anybody here, which I assume is everyone who has gone through puberty, that is not a short-term process. That requires coordination of all these different systems. So the sex hormones, mainly secreted from the testicles and the ovaries, or the reproductive hormones, I should say, help to coordinate that process of puberty. And even before that, in the womb, testosterone has really important effects on growing, sort of developing and maintaining the male reproductive system. And then in puberty, all of that is sort of elaborated on in terms of its effects on the brain and the body, so that you are physically able to reproduce and you start to have the desire to reproduce. So for males, the desire to reproduce, and females, requires obviously libido and patterns of sexual attraction. But for males in particular, it requires male-male competition. And that's from our evolutionary history. In some places in the world, that is still required. That's what is very common in non-human animals. So it has the same ability to get into our blood and go everywhere the blood goes. Hormones can go anywhere the blood goes and act on any cell with the appropriate receptor. So the steroid hormones, especially testosterone and estrogen, can go anywhere and have these very widespread effects and tell your brain when sperm is available, because testosterone is what helps to produce your gametes, your sperm, what you need to reproduce. Just like insulin knows when blood sugar is around and coordinates those energetic processes, testosterone in males helps to coordinate the male ability, to produce sperm. And then it signals to the brain, you have sperm available. Do you see fertile mates in your environment? And let's get you motivated to have access to those gametes, let's just say. So it's a very similar sort of function as I described with insulin. But insulin is easy to talk about because it's not about sex and sex differences. But the sex hormones do something very similar and coordinate your secondary sex characteristics, also your development of muscle, your deep voice, body hair, size and strength, and all of that with sperm production and a motivation to compete and to actually mate. So, yeah, that's another long answer. So get me to stop so I don't have to give you such long answers.
Okay, so you have also spoken about status and aggression, and sorry, but before I go into aggression, I just wanted to know when it comes to mating behaviors, right? Are there any similarities between other non-human animals or other mammals, for that matter, and us, leaving aside the chimps that you've spoken about? And how does that also play into intimate partner violence and other aspects wherein because we are in a time where yes, we have progressed much far because there's declining rates of violence, but that doesn't mean that it does not completely exist. It's not non-existent. And do you have any ideas to how testosterone can explain this behavior, and how we ourselves, like both we are us men or males in particular, can watch out for certain warning signs in us and ensure that we don't lead ourselves into aggressive behavior?
I'm so glad you brought that up and asked that question at the end. And so I think everyone, just from looking at the news and even watching what's going on around you, even in your community, it's obvious that the overwhelming share of really aggressive, lethal violence is committed by men. Like, that's just a fact. It's all over the world. And that is also the case in non-human animals, that there's a huge sex difference in physical aggression. And that is because, and it depends on the species, it depends on the environment. Again, females are also capable of really high levels of physical aggression. However, the pattern to be explained is the male domination there. And in the book, I described my trip out to Scotland to see the red deer in the height of the mating season. And that's where you see testosterone in many animals is seasonal because mating is seasonal. So testosterone goes up during the rut, which is the height of the mating season. And what it does is, I'll just say in humans, once you go through puberty, you have your weaponry. You've developed your weaponry in puberty, and that is your large body size and your muscles. And then you intimidate via your voice and kind of sticking your chest out, and you've got your certain facial features and bone structures that can signal strength and power and can be intimidating to other males. But you don't go through a seasonal mating, so we don't really appreciate what testosterone is doing in men because it just does it, and then it kind of maintains those features. But if you look at a seasonal breeder like a red deer and you look at the stags, their antler growth, which those are just weapons on their head that are sharp and they're designed to kill other males, poke out their eyes, twist them to the ground. Those are seasonal and they grow under the influence of testosterone. And when testosterone goes down, sperm is no longer being made. You don't need weapons anymore. No sperm, no fertile females usually, unless you're a juvenile and you're fertile, and the weapons and the aggression go right with it. And I described that trip because that was just really mind-blowing for me to see in action. So in humans, we just have these kind of more permanent effects in males. And I should just say, when this is very controversial, I guess, or sensitive to say, this is a sensitive situation to talk about because domestic abuse is such a serious problem. And but it is a fact that women also commit domestic abuse at very high rates, and people don't know about this because it's not people don't like to hear these statistics, but I think it's important to be accurate. What women do, again, this depends on the culture. Women will abuse their male partners or their female partners at high rates, but with much lower levels of intensity, so that first of all, they're not able physically to inflict the kind of damage that males are able to inflict on, men are able to inflict on women. Men are much more likely to kill or seriously injure their domestic partners. Women are more likely to, inflict much lower level injuries, but they are certainly capable of violence. And that's a problem for men who are not able, for cultural reasons, usually to report that violence. But so we do see something like domestic violence in non-human animals. I saw that in the chimps. I saw a very protracted, and this went into Time magazine, this very protracted beating where the dominant male used a stick to beat a female while she held and tried to protect her baby. And what the data showed from that, sorry, I get goosebumps because it's so sort of disturbing, but it is also interesting. And of course, that's not what is going on in humans, because there's no culture in chimps. There is culture in humans that can be leveraged to reduce that kind of behavior. But in the chimps, what we discovered, or what other researchers actually in the field site and other field sites have discovered, is that the more a particular male aggresses upon a female, the more likely she is to mate with him and have his particular children. So in the chimpanzees, at least, and possibly in some other animals, this is an evolved strategy for the males to control reproductive access to females. It doesn't just happen in animals for no reason. There's usually some evolutionary reason for that. And in humans, what we know is that culture is 100% the answer, regardless of the cause, whether it's partially genetic and adaptive strategy for males, or whether it's because something bad happened in your earlier environment or patriarchy. We know that the culture is the answer, because in societies where I talk about Singapore in the book, where the laws are extremely strict and the cultural norms are highly disapproving of male upon female violence. And you see extremely low levels of all kinds of male perpetrated violence, and female violence also.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer as well. I just want to continue along these lines. When it comes to sexual selection amongst human beings, and presumably with whether it's same sex or even heterosexual relationships, what sort of behaviors or personality can be influenced by testosterone that would be attractive to each other and therefore would lead to courtship or mating for that matter?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because so this is a good opportunity for me to explain that a lot of people have the idea that higher testosterone, if you were to pick out the highest testosterone male among a group of men, say, that you would be able to predict he would have certain characteristics, like be, really like to get in fights, or be very funny even, or super strong, or have, a very high libido. And it turns out that there is not clear evidence linking testosterone variation within males to a bunch of behavioral characteristics. What there is strong evidence for is that the sex difference in testosterone, the 10 to sometimes 20 or 30 times the level of testosterone in men compared to women, is what explains these large differences in these large patterns of behavior that have to do with sex, like preferring a higher number of partners, a reduced need, initially anyway, for an emotional connection before sex, higher libido, and this increased likelihood to engage in physical aggression. Those do seem to be a function of male typical levels of testosterone, but not necessarily high testosterone within men. What is important within men is how testosterone changes given a certain social situation. So there are studies by James Roney that show that if there is an attractive female, say, or it could be, I don't know that if there's data on same-sex couples and if there's a male competing for an attractive male. What we know is that in heterosexual men, if they are kind of primed to attract, say, a woman, their testosterone may respond if they feel they're in a competitive situation, and it may rise. And it's these shorter term changes that seem to predict certain male behaviors that may then be attractive to women. But really what's attractive to most women is what's attractive to most men, which is kindness and intelligence and general physical attractiveness. But for women in particular, things like high status, high earning capacity, stability, those things seem to be more important to women. And given our culture, the being big and strong and tough is not quite as important. Again, it depends what kind of culture you're living in. Women tend to be more concerned with acquiring resources that they can use to invest in their children and having a good father and a good husband. So I'll just say that these changes we see within men when they're in a competitive situation, even if there's no woman around, if status is at stake, it's as though there is a woman around, because a lot of status competition in non-human animals, and apparently it seems in humans, is ultimately about being able to acquire either more mates or, quote, better mates, meaning more reproductively viable. And we see this in non-human animals, and this is called the challenge hypothesis. And this is there's a big body of literature showing that is these changes in testosterone that seem to be important, whether it goes up or it goes down, in sort of guiding adaptive behavior in threat and conflict situations for men where status is at stake, that sort of give you information about whether you should confront the threat and challenge, or whether you should back down because you're probably going to lose and you want to live and fight another day.
Okay. All right. So that's a part of exploring relationships and mating strategies. But I would also now like to further dive into the implications of testosterone into sports. Now, I don't want to go too political into this, but we've first of all, I just want to ask, how does it differentiate? Because we men, we are told that we have more testosterone and therefore it's easier for us to build muscle, whereas if it's a female who goes to the gym, she's not able to build as much of muscle as she can, but rather there are different effects. Like we bulk, but then for them they get a leaner physique is what I heard. Yes. What I heard from there, I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, is this a myth or is this actual reality? Is something that I've been also thinking about. And what are your thoughts on it, or what have you found out as to whether, how does it help both the sexes, or is there any other advantage for only one sex for that matter?
So are you aiming at trans women in sports, or just sex differences in sports?
First of all, I'm just aiming at normal sex differences between males and females. I'll address sex and those aspects later as we go along.
Okay. So yes, there are massive, massive sex differences. And again, this is one of those things where what you see and what you think is probably correct. There's a lot of BS out there right now, especially about how testosterone's not that important, or some women have really high testosterone in the male range. No, they don't. And yes, it is super important in explaining sex differences. It is everything. And just being a man, even if you're not working out, just being a man and going through male puberty, this is all on average. It's not that some women can't beat some men in some sports. This is if you have, in general, trained athletes. But even in non-trained athletes, like most boys, even before puberty, can throw much farther and more accurately than most girls. Some of that is due to culture. But even when you have girls who are trained in throwing, etc., boys can throw much faster. And adult males and females who both play professional baseball, I have to remember the speeds, and it would be in miles per hour, but it's something like the women's fastest throw. Oh gosh, I hope I don't get this wrong. I think it's something like 65 miles an hour, and the men's fastest throw is up towards 100 miles an hour. It's something on that range. And that's when both are equally trained. So you've got differences not only in muscle, but also the way the shoulder works. And I don't know enough about the details of that, but we have differences in our muscles and ligaments and how they connect. And so in puberty, the whole point, what testosterone is part of what is doing physically is basically the opposite of what estrogen does. And we can understand that when you understand how the sexes, what they need to do to reproduce. And historically for males, that has been to compete with other males, because you guys aren't using your bodies to produce the baby. You're not using your body to feed the baby. That takes a lot of energy, and that takes safety, right? So women have to do something different. So estrogen and testosterone in puberty, basically when we're little kids, 5 under the influence of these diverging sex hormones. And that is when, I hope I'm not losing you. Uh-oh.
Can you hear me now, ma'am?
Oh, you're back. Yes, you're back.
Okay.
You're back. You're frozen. You're frozen, but I can hear you.
I'll
Okay.
switch off my camera again and I'll switch it
Oh,
on.
I see. Okay. And okay, so in puberty, you've got estrogen, and testosterone, and each of these hormones help the body sort of know what to do with the energy we're taking in. So testosterone biases energy that is taken in to be converted into muscle, basically, or to be used to grow muscle. And estrogen would bias that process towards the deposition of fat. And that is because of the different needs we have for reproduction. So not only do males develop more muscle than females, and that helps in sports. Fat does not help in sports. It hurts. It's just like if you had to strap on 10 to 20 pounds of like bags of flour and run a marathon, it is only going to slow you down. It does not help. So it's that difference in fat and muscle. And then you have to throw in the other effects of testosterone on bone density, bone length, meaning you have a taller person, and in a lot of sports that helps, especially like swimming and jumping, of course. You have a lot of enhanced upper body strength compared to lower body strength. So sports that rely on the upper body, males can have a huge advantage, anywhere from about 10% to 60% of an advantage in any particular sport. Yeah, I could go on and on about that, but it's basically what you think.
All right, because I mean, for now, if I had to make such statements without even giving valid evidence, I would be labeled as a misogynist or a sexist for that matter. So I just refuse to have conversations with people about that.
Yeah, don't forget transphobe. That's
yes,
also
exactly.
considered transphobic.
Yes, I'll address that in a few moments.
Okay.
But I just wanted to address this main aspect. Now, your book is a really powerful book, because it actually empowers not only not only men or women for that, it empowers everybody because of the overwhelming amount of evidence, as well as you've done case studies. You've talked to people who are different from what people would call as normal, or even they would ostracize them because they're different. Now, I'm pretty sure you've heard of Dr. Colin Wright, the evolutionary biologist.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Yeah. Yes, I do. I know. I just saw him at a conference, actually. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I'll just give you a little backstory. It was a bit surprising for me, because when all this this lash out over sports, if trans women were supposed to compete in that, and the even concept of biological sex having been a binary concept, and you shouldn't say otherwise. You should say it's always a spectrum. It got me so confused, because I was like, no, you're not supposed to say it. You're being, because I have had my own interactions with my friends break down because of that. They literally call me names and stuff, and I was like very perplexed. I was like, what did I not know?
Yeah.
So can you please, in that sense, can you just please talk about intersex conditions?
Yeah.
You've given certain cases in the books, and I want to know why, even though with the existence of intersex people, does biological sex actually remain a spectrum, or is it still binary? Yeah, because I mean, I would not want
Okay.
to answer this, but because I want the audience to hear your views on this as well as with the
Okay.
evidence that
Can you
you've
put your
proposed.
camera back on and then turn it off if things go bad?
Yeah, okay. My camera is
I
still
like
on.
seeing
Can you
you.
not see me, ma'am? I'm here. I'm not there.
No, I just like seeing you.
No, no, my camera is on, ma'am.
Oh no, sorry. I don't see you. No, I just see GU. But that's okay.
Oh, okay. I'll switch it off and switch it on then.
Okay. Um, because I
Am I
have to
here
get
now?
no.
Oh, okay. I'll try to figure out some
That's okay.
internet issue with my
I'll
internet.
just
I'll just try.
respond to what you're
Okay.
saying. So there's no is you said is sex still on a spectrum? It was never on a
Yeah.
spectrum.
Okay.
So just to make that clear. So yeah, people get upset about this, but I am over people being upset about something that's so basic and true. They're upset because the cultural narrative has changed so that something that is obviously true is now morally questionable. And that I'm not having that anymore. We need to change the narrative so that what we prioritize is the truth and what we focus on is understanding the implications of the truth. The fact that there are male and female, which is what it is, there is nothing other than male and female. That fact has no implications for the value of anyone who has an intersex condition or who is has gender dysphoria or has transitioned or any of that. It's just this fact of biology that normally is not very important. However, we need to know what the facts are because there are some important social and political decisions being made about, do males get to participate in the female category in sports? Should females have to share their jail cells with males, etc.? So we need to have words, at least, that we can use to talk about these issues so that everybody can weigh in. All right. So can you still hear me?
Yes, we can, but you're stuck on
Okay,
my
sorry, because I
screen.
can't see you, so I get nervous. Okay, so
No,
that's
no,
thing.
my camera is on, ma'am, but I really now you're
No,
stuck on
no,
my
I
screen,
know.
but I can hear you.
Okay, so that's thing one is we should be able to, good faith people should be able to discuss what they, facts and interpretations of science. That is how we learn what is true, by challenging each other. So anybody who's trying to silence you or call you names, bye-bye. They're not your friend and they're not a good scholar. And they should, what are they even doing in academia or in your social life? You can try to educate them, but yeah, those aren't people you necessarily want to have around if they're calling you names. Okay, so in every sexually reproducing organism, and this goes back over 1 billion years, there are two kinds of gametes. There are eggs and sperm, essentially. They're not always eggs and sperm, but in multicellular animals, that's what they are. The gametes are, and the organisms that make small mobile gametes or sperm are male, and those that make larger, less mobile gametes are female. Okay, there are some, everyone brings up the exceptions where some animals will make both kinds of gamete, and maybe they change their sex over their lifetime, or they can be both at once, or maybe if you have kids, like you have a 5-year-old kid or nephew or little brother, that one is not making sperm. So does that mean he has no sex? No, of course not. He's still male. It is the design plan essentially for gamete production. And in mammals, that is going to be testes and ovaries. It's not sex chromosomes. It's not genitalia. It's not hormones. And it's something very basic. Those other things, the male and female behavior, sex chromosomes, all that other stuff is on a spectrum. Okay. Those are the things that are on a spectrum. And those are associated with sex, and they can vary tremendously. You can have a male human who has XX sex chromosomes, and that's because you have the bit of the Y chromosome, the sex determining region of the Y chromosome gets translocated to one of the X chromosomes, and that person can develop testes. And so it is not the chromosomes. And you can also have females who have what looks like a penis, as in someone who has an intersex condition. So most people, as far as I understand, from people I've spoken with and from my understanding of the literature, most people who have intersex conditions, which are exceedingly rare, it is about 0.02%, 0.02%, not 0.2, not 2, 0.02% of the population who have true intersex conditions. That means not easily identifiable as male or female. Other statistics that you see will try to say that it's as common as red hair. That is just completely untrue. This is based on one paper that has been totally dismissed due to methodological problems and including conditions that have nothing to do with being intersex. So one condition is more common in athletes who may identify as female, may be legally female, may have been raised as female, but who are in fact male. This is called 5-alpha reductase deficiency. There are some well-known female identifying athletes who have this condition. And this condition results from a mutation in a gene that codes for an enzyme that converts testosterone into DHT, dihydrotestosterone. It is DHT that is active in fetal development and causes the development of essentially of the male reproductive system, but most importantly for sex identification of a penis. If you don't have that enzyme, you don't grow a penis and you have what looks like a vagina. Everything else is male. Everything, you actually have testes inside of you in your abdomen, but they don't descend because you need DHT to do that. If these individuals who have what's called 5-ARD grow up in a remote area without without sort of modern medical care, they may be identified as female and raised as female. However, they behave like boys because the testosterone has gotten into their brain in fetal development as it does. And that's why boys have more rough and tumble play because they have higher testosterone in utero. These little kids who are boys actually, because they're male, have high rates of rough and tumble play, tend to, in puberty, be attracted to the opposite sex, tend to be attracted to females, even end up marrying females. And so this is an intersex condition, although this is a person with testes that produce testosterone. They have XY sex chromosomes. They just have external genitalia that look female. That is an intersex condition. These are referred in the media, they're referred to, these people, as women with exceptionally high testosterone. However, they are male with normal male levels of testosterone that act on their body and give them a huge athletic advantage. So that's why they're overrepresented in female sports, because they have testes and testosterone. So I don't know if I answered your question there.
Well, okay. I mean, you had said that biological sex is the concept is based on the gametes that is produced. So I'm happy with that for now.
So I should just say, yeah. So the intersex condition, there's not a third sex. These are people with intersex conditions, and they don't want to be considered a third sex or evidence that sex is on a spectrum. If sex is on a spectrum, then you're going to have many, many, many different sexes. We don't. We have two. And these people are not, weird. They're just part of natural variation, but not a third sex. And they're, sometimes not reproductively viable, but in 5-ARD, they can be. Anyway.
Okay. All right. So now I will bring in the very heretical questions that society should not talk about. I just want to know, first of all, can you see me though? Because I've switched on my
No.
camera and many of them are saying that they can't see me, but okay, all right. I'll just go ahead then if it's fine with you.
Okay. That's fine.
Uh, I was
I
saying
hope
they
I
can
get
see
to
me.
talk to your audience.
Sure, you can. If you want, I can ask them to switch on the cameras as well. Towards
Oh,
the
I would
it's
love
almost
that.
okay. It's almost 45 minutes. Do you have a little bit more time to spare a few more questions?
Yeah, I got to open a window. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
Um, yes, whoops, you saw, I didn't want anyone to see my bed there.
Okay. Yes. So actually, I just want to ask this most important heretical question,
Yeah,
or questions for that matter. Oh God, I hope I don't face consequences for this, but whatever it is, I'm just going to ask you.
you might. I
Uh,
did.
okay. So what is what is relevant of testosterone as well as the transgender people competing in sports, and do they actually have a competitive advantage over each sex, and especially males over females, those people who are born males but transition females, uh, but do they have a competitive advantage over females? Because the reason I ask you this is it's this fighting for sports is not seen much in male sports where a woman wants to come and compete. Not much. It's not seen much. Whereas the
Right.
women say, okay, the males have a far greater advantage than us. And a brilliant shining example was what happened with Leah Thomas.
Yeah.
And many of them weren't happy with all the how do I say this, with all the wins that this person was getting,
Yeah.
that Leah Thomas
Yeah.
was getting, and the physical advantages were just evident for people to see, but then they just
Yeah.
kept
I mean,
saying,
yeah, it's clear.
yeah,
Yeah.
they
Okay.
just kept saying it's
Again,
all practice. And I was even talking to someone
yeah,
who just
the, sorry, go
sorry,
on.
sorry, sorry. I just wanted to continue. I was even talking to someone. Now, I don't have any prejudice towards people, but I just wanted to hear more people on their views. So they said, it's more of practice and it's more of training that just ensures that it's if you a man can compete better than a woman or not. And I was like just taken aback. I said, how do you know? Because if I know I can be beaten up by a guy just like that because he's competitively stronger than me and he's taller than me and he's broad shouldered than me as well. But if I was to have competed with someone else, then I would have won also. But that's difference based on physical differences. And I was really taken by the answer, this answer away. So please, I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. It is so crazy because everyone knows what the truth is ultimately, I think, but people just want so badly to believe that we are the same, that the sexes are the same, that they start saying crazy stuff, and then people start to kind of believe it. So I am fighting back against this because, of course, males, if you have, and it's so insulting to women. That is so annoying to hear. And I've heard it before. We're not trying hard enough. Serena Williams, not trying hard enough. Serena Williams, probably the best female athlete of all time. She is amazing. Sorry, I even get upset about this. And she herself admitted on David Letterman that she would be beaten in like 5 minutes by the top male player, that there would just be zero contest. She, in fact, would be beaten by, I think it's like she would be number 600 in the world if she were to play against, if it were an open category and men were playing against, men and women were just competing for number one. She'd be around 600. And you will even have the Florence Griffith Joyner, who I think still holds the world record in like the 100. Sorry, I'm probably screwing this up. I think it's 100 meters. Her time was beaten by a 14-year-old schoolboy. So there are huge differences. And it's not due to effort, that is ridiculous. There's no evidence. And anyone who says that really has a problem with logic and evidence. And the question is, it's like you don't even need to entertain that. That's just ridiculous. Men, of course, are bigger and stronger. I didn't mention hemoglobin, which carries oxygen around to our muscles. Men have 12% more. That alone gives a huge advantage in terms of power. Men have bigger lungs, bigger hearts, that stronger bones, more muscle, less fat. It's like, if you're equally trained, yeah, men are going to win. Okay. So then the question is it fair for someone like Leah Thomas to compete in the female category? It's fair in terms of she wasn't cheating and she's following the rules, and the rules were set the way they were because this is such a sensitive and controversial and sort of explosive question, because people want to respect the sensitivities and rights of transgender people and who have difficult lives in many respects relative to people who are not trans. And you have to imagine, if you had a little brother or sister or kid or whatever who has transitioned and is a really, wants to be an athlete, what would you want for them? And I can't say that if my 13-year-old were, if he wanted to identify as a girl, would I want him to play in the female category? I'm not sure, because I'm not in that position. So I just do not think we should judge anyone who is advocating for that particular point of view. However, the science is clear, and that is that if you're someone like Leah Thomas, who has gone through a medical transition with testosterone, so born male, and then blocks testosterone and then takes estrogen. So she goes through the male puberty. Going through the male puberty, most of that you cannot undo the advantages that are gained, especially in swimming. If you're 6'4", then you're going to have a longer reach than most women. So right off the bat, you can pull more water for each stroke. You have stronger bones, larger heart, larger lungs, more muscle, etc. So there is an initial advantage of at least 10% males over females in swimming. If you block testosterone, so the initial muscle advantage is somewhere between 40 and 60 to even 70%, which can translate into a strength advantage that can be even twice as great in the upper body. So you would have to show that when you block testosterone, all of those advantages are lost. So we know that they're not. Obviously, the bone strength and the bone height and the lungs and hearts are not lost. Hemoglobin does come down, and that does have an impact on performance. Muscle does come down. However, puberty has these relatively permanent effects on the muscle. Muscle does need to be maintained to a certain extent, so it does decline when you block testosterone, but only about 5 to 10%, when the initial advantage is far more than that. So this is a long way of saying yes, trans women will, on average, have a significant athletic advantage in most sports. And the extent of that advantage, the type of advantage, depends on the individuals and on the sport. There may be some sports where blocking testosterone does equalize performance. I haven't seen that evidence. So we have no evidence to show that the advantage is lost. That being said, I think this is a question of ethics and not science, because the science is established. There's an advantage there. What do we do is the question. How do we handle this with sensitivity? How do we have these conversations without calling everybody, names and bigots? That's not going to help anyone, especially the trans people who want to compete. It only creates more division and hostility. So I think we need to be clear and accurate about the science, tone down the argument, the discussion, and really open it up and listen to people and try to figure out what a fair solution is.
Okay, I just want to wrap up before I have the members also interact with you. I just have one last question for you. You have spoken so much about, we should not deny the science. We should not just give false arguments that are seeming illogical or without having any baseless evidence. So when we have so much of evidence to say that there are sex differences, how do we convey to the public that when we cite this evidence and we address these differences, that first of all, we're not supposed to justify discrimination, violence against each other, and also at the same time be openly objective and ensure that we have an open mind and should be able to discuss and reason out as to why we stand for something or we stand for a particular viewpoint or a belief. How do we do that?
Yeah, okay, that's a big question. My approach as an educator is to focus on, first of all, respect for everyone who has a different opinion, and to really instill that in my students by trying to myself be open, be responsive, admitting when I'm been wrong or when I change my mind. But the most important thing, I think, is to emphasize that the facts themselves are going to be the facts. The truth is the truth, no matter what you want it to be. And if you're after the truth, what's important then, if the truth exists independent of what you think, then what's important is to teach and discuss and consider what the implications of that truth are. They're very rare. The truth about biology and sex differences very rarely would itself legitimize any particular behavior or mean that any particular behavior is inevitable. That's almost never true when it comes to complex behavior. We've got to understand how genes and culture interact. And to do that, we need to understand the contribution of the genes. Our culture is incredibly complex. And the fact is that just because something may be inherited to some extent, that doesn't mean that it's not malleable. Every animal who has complex behavior, that behavior is dependent upon the environment, the way in which it's expressed. And we humans have an enormous ability to construct our environment and risk their lives to save others, especially unrelated others. And they, in fact, die while doing this much more often. Look at, especially in war, women do it too, but men do this much more often. We can leverage that by making some changes in the environment. So I think the thing to do in these discussions is focus on implications and teach about that rather than trying to pretend the truth doesn't exist. That is a disaster for education and humanity and democracy, etc.
Okay, with that, I think I'll conclude this. I'll just allow the members to interact with you if they wish to. Their mics and cameras are allowed to be presented to this thing. I just want to confirm, can you actually see me? Because we all can see you, and you're saying that you can't see us.
I can see you, but you're not moving, and that's fine. It's
okay,
a nice shot there. It didn't catch you in some funny face and freeze that forever.
Okay, to my attendees who have come here, if you can all switch on your cameras as well as unmute if you have any questions in particular. Please, I request you to do so. Okay, so we have one person. Others, if you're all willing to do so, please.
Hi, one person. She's probably wondering why she's the only one up there.
Yes, exactly, ma'am. One second.
Well, can people just ask questions?
Sure, ma'am, they can, but I'm giving them the opportunity to do so, but nobody's willing to do so.
Oh, okay.
Can I join in the conversation, please?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. My question is that, like you said, that equally trained opponents of different sexes, in that case, males are going to do better, right? I play badminton here at the university, so for me it is this, to know this fact is in a way discouraging as well. Okay, I'm playing with a male opponent, and this person's biology is already in favor. So there is this a self-esteem or a psychological a thing. But I've also seen females playing, for example, with male faculty, female players with male faculty who are actually beating them in their game. So what would you say?
Yeah,
especially
no, I say this is good. Yeah, I have wondered about badminton specifically, that may be, so first of all, you guys are a casual team. You're not like, but all equally well-trained, serious athletes, or are you?
Hey,
I don't want to make,
yes, the second category would be
oh,
the female
oh,
athletes playing with a male faculty, right?
okay. So you're like a serious, well-trained team.
Uh, Not myself, but yes, the females who play like in the university, they are. So it's
Yeah.
nice
Okay.
to
And it's
find this
males and it's men and women on the team together, or again, or
as opponents, yes.
yeah. So badminton, I don't actually. I was wondering if that is one of the sports where strength and power are not the most important things, and so it is possible. Like I said before, there are some sports where this may not be the case, and so I would wonder if you had a team of women against a team of men, if I would guess that the men would win purely because of height. But assuming, I don't know a lot about badminton, I assume that height is an advantage. But if it's not, then, it could be that the women could win in badminton. It is the sports where having more upper body strength and power and speed is important. And that may not be badminton. And so I can't say what's going on there, but I do think there are some sports where women may very well have an advantage. And that is why, badminton is probably one of the sports that is not separated by sex. So in the sports where sex matters, you're generally going to have separate teams. And we will see that the world records, like in tennis or running, swimming, like super long distances, is also one area where females have a chance to actually win. Also, ultra marathons, women can sometimes do as well as men. Although men dominate, it's not like they're blowing women away like they would in swimming or running or baseball. So yeah, that's a long way of saying there are some sports where women can beat men, and I think just from what you're saying, that badminton might be one of them.
Yeah, I like this squash as well, right? Because I see that males, like they might be having like a taller, like a height, or like no bigger, like a body, but females having a smaller like body, that does add to an advantage of agility, doesn't it? So in sports, that is also required. Like females will have a like a swifter movement compared to males. So like wouldn't that act as a pro in case like having a female opponent?
Yeah, I
I
mean
mean, as a
it's
female player.
yeah, what the data show very clearly is that in most sports, males dominate in a big way, and that females do not have a chance. And those are the facts. Like that is the fact just just take tennis and take Serena Williams. I think that's a great example. She does not have a prayer against the top ranked man. She doesn't have a prayer against the second or third or fourth or fifth or sixth ranked man. And that's not just Serena Williams. So that's a sport where serve is everything, and the speed of running back and forth across the court and strength of the upper body. That's just physically, women don't have those characteristics at the same level. So then, I haven't looked specifically at squash. That hasn't come up in what I've read about where women may have a ability to compete. So what I would hope is that knowledge helps women because it helps them retain the chance to excel within their sex without feeling that they're not trying hard enough if they're competing against men. There's an explanation for why Serena Williams can't beat Andy Murray. There's a physical explanation that is totally beyond her control. And again, if there are exceptions to that, I think there are exceptions to that. I don't know all of the exceptions. I don't think it is squash. I think badminton, maybe, but I'd have to look into squash. I wouldn't imagine so because power is also and speed are also important, and height. But there may be some advantages like within women and maybe, smaller size is one of them. But the squash players I know at Harvard, they're all relatively tall. So, yeah.
Yeah, so these like examples that you took, like these are the extreme like athletic examples, right? But as like just a player myself, and especially like seeing those skilled like female players competing the male opponents, where do I draw the line that okay, I mean, I have not just yet reached that point. I can keep pushing, and having a male opponent is not something to be discouraged about.
Oh, no. I mean, there's no reason to be discouraged. You should try as hard as you can. I mean, no, it totally depends what you're after. I mean, I'm just telling you what the facts are. I can't tell you in every situation, how you should feel or behave, but I wouldn't see why you should be discouraged. It depends, if you're in, this is what I'm talking about are, for the most part, competitive elite athletes who are equally trained, who have coaches, who are optimizing their diet and their workout routine. Even this is the case in college and to high school sports at some extent. We see these same patterns all the way through all over the world in international sports. So what you're talking about, I think, is the psychological component. And we have seen that in the 90s, or 80s to 90s, the sex differences narrowed, that gap narrowed because of psychology and culture and opportunities, and then stayed with the sex difference in sports has not budged since then. So that suggests that people are sort of optimizing their effort and have reached sort of physical maximum potential in both sexes, and the sex difference has not changed for, what are we in, to 22, like 45 years or 50 years even.
I hope that badminton has a similar writing compared to the respective skills and stuff.
Yeah, you should look into it. I mean, I'd be
my
interested in that. I'm going to look into badminton. I think, that was my intuition, is that might be one of the ones where females can beat males. I'd like to see a team of men against a team of also highly trained women and see what happens. That would be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I think Aryan has a few questions to ask. Aryan, do you have any questions?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
What's your name again?
Yeah.
And sorry, and I didn't get the name of the woman I just spoke to. Who just spoke to me?
I'm Pragya. Yeah. Hi, I'm Pragya.
Okay. Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you.
My name is Aryan. So
Nice to meet you, Aryan.
Nice to see you too, ma'am. I like how you spoke about just before this sort of the physical aspect of sports, right? Now, the world I come from is a very different sport I play. I am very involved in chess, which is an extremely mental sport,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And I wanted to sort of maybe ask you a question or two regarding the same, because very famously in the 1960s, I think, when at the time Garry Kasparov was the reigning world champion, he very famously declared that a woman is never going to be capable of being a world champion caliber player. In comes in
Yeah.
Judith Polgar and is the first female player to reach those heights, reach the top 10, and beats Garry Kasparov, Vishy Anand, and all these greats, right? But the intriguing case is Judith Polgar was sort of raised to be a genius if we follow the story that sort of follows the Polgar family, right? What example I want to sort of portray to you is the story of two siblings in India, Vaishali and Ramesh Babu Pragnananda. They are arguably two of India's brightest lights of the game. Vaishali is the older sister. I think she's maybe around 16, and Prag is around 14 years old. And he is already in the top 100 players of the world, I think. He's played against the likes of Magnus Carlsen, the current world champion,
Wow.
and has beaten him multiple times
Yeah.
in faster time. Whereas, even though they have had sort of the same regimen, the same coach, and the sort of maybe I'm assuming the like support from the parents, right? That both are heavily invested into the game, and both are represented
Yeah.
India in the Olympics, so they've played for the country. How exactly does this pan out over here in such a mentally strenuous and sport which is heavily reliant on your cognitive abilities?
Yeah.
Why are we seeing such a huge
Yeah.
difference between the two?
Yeah.
This is something I actually wanted to
Okay.
ask.
No, this is a really good question. So I should just say at Harvard, when I did my PhD, my dissertation research was actually on sex differences in cognition. And I didn't even include that in my book, which is weird because everyone who writes a book uses their dissertation for like a big chunk of it. And I didn't really even touch on that. I mean, I just sort of briefly mentioned James Damore and Larry Summers' comments about sex differences in cognition. And I didn't really answer the question. And the reason is, well, I am someone who, as you can imagine, have no problem with any research showing that, hey, males are on average better at anything than females, or females are better at some other thing. First of all, that doesn't tell you what the reason is. That's just an observation of like outcomes of testing, which could be culturally induced, could be have some genetic origin. The reason I didn't include anything is because the evidence that testosterone is involved in cognitive sex differences is not that strong. And I don't like to talk about any evidence for which I don't want to make any assertions unless there's really has a robust evidentiary basis. However, I will say now here comes observation and speculation. The observation is men blow women away in chess, and that kind of abstract, almost object-based kind of spatial. I studied spatial ability. Chess is about a lot to do with spatial ability, with working memory, logic, deduction, all of these traits that men do score higher than women and on tests. So if there were a bell curve of ability in theoretical physics like this, or anything where there's a sex difference, you would see that there are more men at the very high end and more men at the very low end. So I said this to someone else and they're like, so they're more geniuses and more idiots. I don't like that language, but in essence, that is the case, right? So it's not that on average the sexes are so different in like verbal ability or mathematical ability or whatever. We're not. But at the very high end, this is what Larry Summers was saying, there are differences. We don't know where those come from. There's no really good evidence, in my view, about where those differences come from, because the culture is so heavily implicated here. The example you give, yeah, the girl is going through life as a girl, right? The boy is going through life as a boy. They're treated very differently. And yeah, there's the home, but then there's the whole rest of the world. So we don't know if he's doing better because of genes or culture or some interaction. But I will also say that in non-human animals, there's good evidence that there are cognitive adaptations in males that are upregulated by testosterone in utero that females do not have. That testosterone in utero has long-term impacts on nervous system development, and I believe also on cognition. And the reason is that for males to increase their mating opportunities in many animals, they need to be able to navigate a larger territory than females. Females stay safe and reproduce and healthy and live longer lives and increase their reproductive success by staying in a smaller space during the day. And they do, in fact, have shorter day ranges than males do. So males, in order to have larger day ranges, have to have a spatial sense that is more sophisticated than females. Females have other aptitudes that are higher. So I could speculate, that chess has something to do with that sex differences in that ultimate, like in spatial ability somehow, or some kind of abstract reasoning. However, that's pure speculation. I don't see good evidence for any genetic component there. There may be. That's my answer. Sorry, it's not very satisfying.
It's
But sorry, there's one more thing. There's this very famous study that shows that in chess, you might know about this. You see the winner-loser effect, which is part of the challenge hypothesis, where men who are winning get a testosterone increase. So it's as though you're in a physical fight, except for you, its status is the chess outcome of the chess game. So that's maybe as important in your environment as like a bar fight in someone's environment here in Boston, except it's the chess board and your status can be elevated if you win. So every time you play, status is at stake. If you're winning, your testosterone goes up. That reinforces, that feels good, actually. That increases dopamine in conflict circumstances. That can be rewarding and motivating, and it can help you improve your chess game, improve your focus. Women might not have, girls might not have, do not have, in fact, that same response. We don't have that same testosterone response to competition. That could have something to do with it, that there isn't the same reward and motivation as males are experiencing. You know, there's definitely reward and motivation, but it's not the same. Even just neurologically, it's not the same. Hormonally, it's not the same. So.
Yeah. That actually is interesting because I have been sort of tasked I've tried to grow the community of chess in my college. And one of the biggest struggles I actually did face was trying to get sort of my batchmates who were girls to like get into the game. Because this was one of the two reasons I would either it's like it's not interesting enough. I was like, okay, I can understand that. I hated the game when I started it off and then I got addicted. So that's another story. But
yeah, I think you should keep at it. I think, again, culture is the answer here. We don't know what could be if it became normalized for girls and women to play chess. You know, the cultural signals have a huge impact on what we think we can do. So, you know, chess is an awesome game, and I think more women would probably be interested in it if it were sort of like a woman's thing. Or, you know, culturally that way. And maybe it's not culturally that way because women really just don't like it as much. But we don't know until we've really tried. So I would just keep at it.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Doctor, do you have time for the final question, or would you like to wrap it up?
Thank you. Yeah, one more and then I got to go.
Okay, fine. I hope that this question can come from me. It's something relevant to the book. I'll just give you the small context in a few sentences. Puberty blockers for children. And, you know, for example, like, is it advisable to give puberty blockers to children? Because there have been claims. I'm not saying that they confirmed allegations that are true. I'm just saying that they're accusations and they've not been verified or whatsoever. But here are the accusations that you hear. Number one is that they cause sexual dysfunction and sterility. Number two is that if you don't expose children to puberty, that irrespective of the gender identity that will develop sooner or even before that, you're not going to have other effects. Like you're not going to have the other attributes of puberty that will help you become a holistic individual. And number three, is it advisable to give it to them at such a young age, especially when it has its negative effects, if they are true? So that's
okay. What was number one? What was number one?
Puberty blockers for children. Do they whether they cause any sort of sexual dysfunction?
Okay. You're going to have to remind me of the numbers. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
So first of all, the reason people take puberty blockers, which have been again, we have a narrative around transitioning and puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones that has a lot of ideology behind it without a strong evidence base. I'm 100% sure of that. And I find that very disturbing because there's a narrative that if you question any of this, you are not supporting kids with gender dysphoria. And that is not the case. If we want to help people and improve people's lives and physical and mental health, you want evidence-based solutions and you want not to stifle important conversations that can help to clarify what the best policies and procedures are. That is incredibly important, and we have screwed this up massively, especially in this country. Okay. It's a disaster the way it's proceeded, and people's lives are at risk here. Okay, that's thing one. So puberty blockers, there is not enough research on the use of puberty blockers in kids who can start them as young, maybe 9, 10 years old. It depends on when you enter puberty, and there's a huge amount of variation there. And people do this because the marketing of the puberty blockers, all of these drugs, I just want to say at the outset, there's a tremendous, I hate to say this, but it is true, a tremendous influence. There's a lot of money here. So for every kid who takes puberty blockers and transitions, the pharmaceutical industry is making a lot of money. I'll just say that. So this it's difficult to have conversations that are completely unbiased and based on good evidence. It's hard to get that evidence. So puberty blockers have traditionally been used to block puberty in kids who have precocious puberty, which can start at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. You don't want a kid at 5 years old going through puberty. That's what they've been used for, because there's something wrong with a kid who has precocious puberty. That is a disorder. However, the kids who are taking them now have gender dysphoria, which means they're uncomfortable, highly distressed, even in their sexed body, because for them, they feel it doesn't align with who they feel they are in terms of their gender. And there is very little data on the effects of blocking the natural puberty that would occur. What we do know is that the clearest evidence is that there's some negative effects on bone density, which are permanent, predisposing the spine and hips and other bones to weakness and damage. So we know that. The fertility stuff that all the other one of the problems, as you mentioned, with puberty blockers, so which are supposed to, quote, give time for kids who have gender dysphoria to work out their gender. That is not what they are for, and that's not what people are using them for, because that doesn't happen. The kids who take puberty blockers, almost all of them go on to cross-sex hormones. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I sort of missed you when you said all these stuff, and then
Okay.
you went on to the puberty hormones. So yeah.
Okay, so the almost all of the kids who start puberty blockers, something like 95 to 99% of them will go on to use cross-sex hormones and will not go through their natal puberty. If that happens, it is correct. They will be sterile, and they will, most of them will not be able to have orgasms. So no kids, no orgasms. The sexual function aspect of that, we need more research, but that is what's now being reported. Some people may be able to have orgasms, but you're not developing your reproductive, reproductive, say, physiology. Okay, or equipment. But the other thing that you mentioned, I think, is even more important, is that going through puberty is a way for people who are uncomfortable in their body for any reason. And many of us are uncomfortable in our body as we enter puberty, even our sexed body, or questioning our sexuality, or other aspects of our sort of gendered selves. These historically issues have tended to resolve just by going through puberty. So even kids who have declared for many years that they were in the wrong body, etc., most of them will, those issues will be resolved in puberty. Many of those kids will understand that they are gay in puberty, and that their gender nonconformity and thus sort of painful relationship with their body will resolve, because they'll come into their sexuality. That is being prevented by puberty blockers. And instead, these kids will transition. And for some kids, there are people who say that no kid should take puberty blockers. I'm so far not of that view. I know trans people who are very happy with their transitions and glad that they took puberty blockers. That doesn't mean that they might also have been happy to go through puberty and then live without life dependence on cross-sex hormones. So it's complicated and we need more research. And I should just say, we know from non-human animals that there are some cognitive and developmental effects of taking puberty blockers and delaying the natal puberty, because this is when there's sort of another rewiring of the brain that is being, the sort of timing of puberty is off, and the timing of that transition then may have long-term physical and psychological and cognitive impacts.
Okay, well, you're stuck on my screen, but I just wanted to end it with that and just say, because I think it's important for us to not have an objective approach, but rather a subjective approach to subjective self-identification of people. Because as you said, some people are happy, some people are not. So having an objective legislation or an objective political bill that's passed on to treatment for everybody, it's quite dangerous, and it will have its effects as well.
Right.
With that, I think I'll thank you. You're still stuck on my screen, ma'am, but I hope that you can still hear me. So I'll say this. Thank you so much, Dr. Carole Hooven, for having attended this book discussion. And we are indeed extremely honored and privileged to have you over here. With that, I come to the conclusion of this event. To all the audience members who attended, I hope that you enjoyed. Please go and buy her book, Testosterone, if you want to know more of what we've discussed and even more details about this hormone as well. Please buy it from leading bookstores around you. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank
you, Dr.
you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And thanks for the great
questions.
questions.
Looking forward to hosting you in the future sometime as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you, Doctor. Bye-bye.
Bye.